into my life and make me a more disciplined person. As a teacher, I like to remember always the teachers I was privileged to pass through. And they were indeed people I would appropriate my learned friends. They are people I can appropriate at any time. So I am pleased to have, as part of the organizers, those I have been privileged to instruct the way I was instructed by those who instructed me. It's a pleasure to be in your midst. I like to dress a bit elderly so that I won't be perpetually taken for a young man. Inside me, I'm actually a youth. But by February next year, I will turn 60. I'll be qualified to be called an elder statesman. And I said at least for 1 month from that date, I will work with walking sticks so that everybody who sees me will know I'm going. So today we are together. I haven't moved to that level yet. I am asked to discuss with you. I am asked to share with you my thoughts on human rights and accountability in Nigeria. I think when we complain about human rights violations, some of us we say it's our constituency. We say because it's our son. Wait until when it is the son of your own son and you can do what you want to do. So the times are a bit different, but the subjects remain constant. And the character of challenges, but for some little variation, remain largely the same. Slavery experience. So though we are human, we were treated differently. Somebody could see you in the street, a group of white boys could see you in the street if you were within those regions. Just beat you up for fun, put a rope on your neck, hang you on the tree, light some fire under you, and roast you. And they were not breaking any law. What the difference was between them and you was just the color. But you were the same human beings. But because at that time we were classified as chattel, as property to be bought and sold, we were less than human and did not enjoy the rights of human. So when you think of the character of that time and now, you will know the difference between who you are now and what we were at that time. Human rights is the right that makes you human. Without it, you're like a slave. You're like a chair, you are like a shirt. Anybody can do anything they want to do, and they will not break any law in doing so. So there are those peculiar rights. They include the right to life, liberty, right to freedom of thought, expression, right to movement, participation, security, work and environment, etc. All of these we did not have while the black man was a slave. And in this society where somebody is classified as less than human, they lose all these rights. So these are the things that make you human. Somebody has described human rights as something of which no one may be deprived without a great affront to justice. There are certain deeds which should never be invaded. Some things which are supremely sacred. There are things you don't do in your society. Some of them are minor. You do them and get away with them. But there are those you will do and the community will gather for you the next hour. Human rights is taken as such quality of possession, which cannot be taken away without everybody shouting, no, this is abomination, no, you can't do this. Somebody gets up and kills another, there is problem. In our ancient society, he should prepare to commit suicide, or his family should be prepared to replace the person whom he has killed. We remember things fall apart, and the story of Ikebefuna, who was given back as compensation for the woman that was killed in the other community. So you cannot tamper with the rights of a person and not receive condemnation from society. The reason there is that collective condemnation is that these are considered no-go areas. They are the very things that make him human, and taking them away is subjecting him to less than humanity. These rights had existed even prior to their classification as human rights as a universal idea. They had existed in varying degrees and for different periods of time within some national legal systems and in relation to certain specific topics on the international scene. So whether you are in the village or you are talking within the context of a state or a nation, these rights are recognized as rights, and any interference with them is considered a serious wrong. Now, while we all know what human rights are, you may be wondering how did they then come to that convergence of opinion about classifying these rights as peculiar and special rights. A little brief on the development of human rights, I'm sure, will answer that question for us. From the point of the United Nations, what is pinpointed as the origin of human rights is the year 539 BC, 539 before Christ, when the troops of Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. On conquering Babylon, Cyrus the Great freed all his slaves in that place and declared that everybody had equal right to be treated as a human being and that nobody should be treated as slave. He decided that all human beings are entitled to choose their own religion, establish their racial equality. He established racial equality within the society and ensured that there was no more distinction between slaves and other people who were considered those who had the full rights as human beings. Now, what Cyrus did was to bake these rules into a cylinder, and that cylinder is referred to as the precepts of Cyrus, the Cyrus cylinder, which contained these provisions, declaring the rights of everybody and securing the rights of everybody. So in more contemporary terms, what we like to consider the first legislation on human rights will be the Magna Carta of 1215. Now we know that it was a political instrument. King John was faced with a serious situation of threats from neighboring countries, France and others, etc. And he needed the cooperation of the lords. And he had a feudal society in which several lords owned several manors. And King John needed their cooperation for their soldiers to fight together with him to be able to defeat the enemy. And so they told him, well, we are going to fight with you, but there are terms. It's going to be on terms. The terms on which we will fight with you are this, and that, and they listed a number of terms. One of them was a term that said that no citizen, by citizen, what they had in mind was they themselves, the lords. No lord will be dispossessed of his property or in any way dispossessed of his rights or his entitlement for any reason other than a reason that is contained in the law of England, and that he has been found wanting by his equals. Now this established what they run in England today, the jury system. The king everything, and the king could do no wrong prior to 1215. The king could do no wrong. The king could kill you, he could take your property, he could take your wife or take your husband, he could do whatever he likes. What do we do now in Nigeria? I think in the western area, when the king speaks, everybody choruses, KDSU. KDSU is always right. If it is in the east, they say Igwe. Nobody challenges what the king has done. Whatever the king did was right. And so until 1215, the king had the right to do anything, seize any lost property, seize any lost manor, seize anybody's property, kill anybody. It was act of the king and he could do no wrong. But in 1215, the laws got the king, King John, to agree and to sign, among others, that he will not exercise any such power except the person has been found guilty of breaking a law of England, and he is so found guilty by his peers. So until today, unlike what we do here in Nigeria, you are arrested, charged to a court, a judge sits and listens to the whole thing and gives judgment. In England, they will bring your rates, you are equals. Ordinary people in the streets, market woman, civil servant, mechanic, organizer, teacher, nurse, they will assemble a number of them as your peers and as people, regular people in the society. So you come before the judge, the cases are argued by the one who is accusing you, and they argue your defense. The judge tells them to listen. At the end of the day, the judge will ask them to repair and go and consider their opinion. They will go, the lawyers will come and address them, and then these ordinary people, each of them will decide in his or her mind whether he or she thinks you are guilty. So before the judge announces your decision, these ordinary men will in their session before the court, yes, Mr. John, what do you think? And he will say, I think he is guilty. Boma, what do you think? I think he is not guilty. Each of them will express his thoughts. And when they gather their decision, the poll will be taken. The majority decision, if the majority says you are guilty, then the jury will return a guilty verdict. If the majority says you are not guilty, they think you are innocent, they return a not guilty verdict. So the work of the judge is simply to sit back when they finish in their session, they welcome them into the court. Yes, jury, have you reached a decision? They say yes. What is your decision? Their leader will come and say, the jury thinks he is not guilty. And the judge will take his gavel and hit, not guilty. So the judge does not do the decision as we do here. The ordinary people decide the fate of their member, of their equal in society, or of their member of their community, because of what King John signed in 1215. That is the practice till today. So that law is considered the first modern time or pre-modern time legislation on human rights. Following from that, there has been a number of other developments, largely collective developments of nations. What I told you about is what England did, but others have followed. There is the International Labour Organization Conventions, which began from 1919. You are all familiar with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, where all the nations that came together tried to articulate what they consider the rights of man, what they consider sacred and important. Did we do it because they just thought they should do so? Answer was no. Before 1945, there had been the First World War and there was the Second World War, and millions of people were killed for no reason. And so that experience shocked the world into thinking we must do something. We must collectively do something to ensure that this kind of madness does not happen. Charter, those articles which they put together as the core rights that were recognized in the international community as human rights. That was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. With such global declaration, it became the responsibility of every responsible nation to conform with what is contained in those declarations. No wonder after 1948, every nation that emerged and that made constitution practically took Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the bulk of it into their constitution. Just the way your own country has a whole chapter devoted to what Universal Declaration of Human Rights addressed, and that is the chapter 4 of our constitution. So, after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have had the International Convention of Juries, International Committee of Juries, which is an international gathering of juries, lawyers, judges, and all that came up with some ideas about what can be done to preserve human rights. First was in New Delhi in 1959. The second session was held in Nigeria, in Lagos, Nigeria, in 1961, the year after our independence. And in all of this, they try to catalog how things should be done. If somebody is accused, what should happen? Should he just be punished? How can we ensure that he is properly tried and that he has all the opportunity to defend himself before he will be punished? So they came up with these concepts and precepts of rule of law that is adopted as judicial and all other proceedings to ensure that rights can be preserved. If somebody is arrested, don't force him to talk. He has the right to remain silent, as anything he says will be used against him. That's what the police tell you now. Yeah, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you or can be used against you in the court of law. So first, he must be given the right of silence. He will choose how he wants to defend himself, whether by himself or through his lawyer. So if a person is arrested, yes, the law allows you to say, when the police say, come and make statement, the law allows you to say, I won't make statement until my lawyer comes. Every citizen has the right to remain silent. It is not his duty to prove his innocence. It's your duty to establish the crime you say he committed before he will have a responsibility to defend himself. So for that reason, if he chooses not to speak, you cannot force him. Any statement you force him to make, once he raises this in court, you force him to do it, meaning it was given by duress, the court will cancel that statement. So such ideas of how steps we have to take to ensure that these human rights we have talked about in 1948 can actually be brought to reality. The International Committee of Juries came up with such ideas of how proceedings should go to ensure that the rights of man are respected. Then after 1961, just the following year, 1962, we had the twin international conventions that were done by the United Nations. We had the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. We also have the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The first convention addressed what should be the civil rights of every citizen in any country in the world. The second one addressed social, cultural, and economic rights. Now, for many countries, virtually every country of the world, the first one on civil and political rights is part of the law. That on economic and social, cultural rights became an emerging area. Different countries have had different provisions. Some characterize it as rights. In South Africa, they are rights. In Nigeria, they are put as duties of government under Chapter 2 of our Constitution. Government must make effort to ensure that everybody feels a sense of belonging, that everybody gets work. They must manage the economy in such a way that it will benefit the entire country. No side should be sidelined. We must establish federal character commission to ensure that even in employment or government, all sectors or every region is covered, and such things. But at the end of the day, in Section 6, Subsection 6C, where the Constitution talked of the powers of their courts, it said no court has power to consider any question as to whether government has complied with that Chapter 2. So, having identified them, and they were clever, they didn't identify them under Chapter 4 as fundamental rights. They identified them under Chapter 2 as directive principles of government, as rules they are making for government to follow. They expect government policies to achieve all this. There are some on social, some on management of the economy, some on political, some on international law, some on culture, all manner of such directives. But Section 6, Subsection 6C says the courts lack power to answer any question as to that. So you and I cannot go to court to say, they have violated my right to economic survival, for instance. Oh, they are doing the road and it's crossing my water from what their construction is pouring into my pond. I can argue it as a nuisance under court, but I cannot bring it as a violation of my right. It is the duty of government to do, but citizens have no right to raise any question over it. So the only right you are given is political rights to react to them. If the government fails to work according to what the Constitution says they should do, you only have political right to complain to your honorable, for him to talk to his colleagues, for them to pass a resolution in the House. Or if it is something much more serious, tell him to move a motion that your governor or your president should be removed from office by impeachment. If he succeeds in getting to the head of the House, fine. Otherwise, there is nothing else we can do. So the only options we have are those political actions. Or you convince him to go and introduce a bill to declare that particular kind of damage as a violation of right. If they do so, and the National Assembly passes into law, it becomes part of our law, and the courts can now enforce it. So that is what has happened to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, where the African countries in AU, then OAU, met in 1981 and adopted the charter. After then, we in Nigeria passed it into law, and it became the African Charter Enforcement and Ratification Act, Cap A9 of Laws on the Federation of Nigeria 2004. Now, under that right, I can make a claim for secession, which under our Constitution will be an offense or a wrong. I can make a claim for a number of things that are in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Right to work, right to health, right to the environment, good environment. I can make a claim based on that law, but I cannot bring those claims under the Constitution. I cannot say they are violating my constitutional right, but because that act has been made, I can claim under that law. Our courts will enforce it. So these are the only options you have to violation of the government, the directives to government on policy in Chapter 2. You are given only those options. Now, basically, human rights are developed in three epochs. As I observe, first, civil and political rights are recognized worldwide. Economic, social, and cultural rights call it a different category. Now, economic rights have made some progress. The third degree of human rights in the three epochs of its development is what is called the solidary rights, the rights we have in common. Right to good environment, because now we know that if we have a poisoned environment, our right to life, which is the civil and political rights, will be affected. So a number of collective rights, people's right to determine their destiny or determine right to self-determination is now recognized under the third epoch of the development of human rights, the solidary rights. Quite a number of rights. That's why you can now have communities taking action over oil pollution, damaging their things and stuff like that. The solidary rights have gradually emerged, and in quite a number of countries, those rights are being enforced as rights. Now, for the developed countries, we don't have these restrictions we have in our own constitution. Of this one is right, this one is duty, you can do sue government over this. No. They are more serious with the act of government than we have shown. Now, what has human rights been like in Nigeria? I have told you that a whole chapter of our constitution is devoted to what you and I will call human rights. But you know the constitution did not call it human rights. It called it fundamental rights. Yes. So, chapter 4 of our constitution deals with the fundamental rights and liberties of citizens. It puts them in a different category and makes them take precedence over other things in the Constitution. So if there is a clash between a fundamental right and an economic right, the court must give priority to the fundamental right. That is the way the Constitution tries to frame it. Even in the section 9, which talks of amendment of the Constitution, you require for 50 majority of the House before you can amend any provision in the area dealing with fundamental rights. Unlike others that you can amend with two-thirds majority. So they try to classify it that way. But is there a distinction between fundamental rights and human rights? Some will argue that it's a semantic argument. Human rights are moral rights. They are natural rights. Whether you make law or not, they are there. If you violate a person's right, he has the cause for complaint and society must hear him. But the Constitution says they are fundamental rights. And what does fundamental rights mean? It is a right you can't do without. A thing is fundamental when it cannot be done without. Oxygen is fundamental to our existence. Put a human being in a room without oxygen, he dies. Maximum the brain will survive will be 2 to 3 minutes and he will die. So what the law calls fundamental is something that is basic, something that is part of the substructure and you can't do without it. But they are speaking English language to establish law. So they have to use a kind of language and words that can be recognized and enforced in legal terms. So when they say fundamental right, they mean basic right, they mean compulsory rights, they mean rights without which citizens cannot be citizens. So it is still the same. And the distinction is that because you are dealing with the law, whatever is listed there is what the Constitution recognizes as fundamental rights. Anything that, so those things which in other parts of the world are recognized, but which are not in chapter 4, some of which chapter 2 as directive to government to ensure that policies ensure that those things are that way. Those ones do not enjoy the same degree of protection as chapter 4. So fundamental rights are only those rights that the Constitution classified as fundamental rights. They all form part of what in jurisprudence, in global thought, is called human rights. But there are a lot more human rights that exist than what is contained in our chapter 4. So the only distinction is that chapter 5 covers civil and political rights. Very little else is in chapter 4. The bulk of them are civil and political rights. The other genres of human rights or um, groups of human rights appear as duty to government in chapter 2. So, in one of our old cases, Ransom-Kuti versus Attorney General of the Federation, the Supreme Court described fundamental rights. This one, I'm quoting them. Fundamental right is a right which stands above the ordinary laws of the land and which, in fact, is antecedent to the political society itself. It is a primary condition to a civilized existence, and what has been done by our Constitution since independence is to have the rights enshrined in the Constitution so that the rights will be immutable, in quote, to the extent of the immutability of the Constitution itself. So they try to make the rights as important and as vital and as protected as the Constitution itself. So you can't tamper with the rights. You will have to go through constitutional amendment. You will have to tamper with the Constitution before you can tamper with those rights. That's how they have tried to protect those rights. But in addition to the chapter 2, as I told you, the African Charter Act has introduced nearly everything in chapter 2, in addition to our chapter 4, the fundamental rights. Those fundamental objectives and directive principles of government have now been covered in the African Charter Act. So what began as a regional arrangement to respect the rights of citizens has transformed to full law in Nigeria that can be enforced by the courts. So now you can go to make claims for violation of your right to environment. You just have to be wise enough to avoid meaning the Constitution. Don't make it as a claim under the Constitution. Come by the African Charter Enforcement and Ratification Act. It's a law of the Federation of Nigeria, and the courts will grant you your prayer. So all we have to do is note that even the economic, social, and a whole lot of the solidary rights are now rights in Nigeria. Students were asking me in the class, why is government persecuting IPOB? Why is government doing this? Why is government doing that? Because there is right to secession in the African Charter Act. So the possible answer is that they did not come by the Act. They should have looked at the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and tried to claim what they are claiming in line with the existing law, and not to carry arms against the state. In any nation, once you pick up arms against the state, it becomes insurgency, and government has a right to try to quell it. But they could have moved the motion, they could have held a meeting of all legislators in that area and resolved it. And if all the people from that region resign from Nigerian government, there is problem. It means they can make their own laws, obey their own laws, refuse their laws. You are compelled to deal with it as a legal issue. But they didn't go that way. They took the route of picking up arms. And once you pick up arms, it becomes a criminal activity and an insurgency. So the African Charter Act has expanded the rights, the fundamental rights. It has gone beyond the fundamental rights. It has covered a large part of, if not all parts of what is human rights in the parts of the world. We also have the Freedom of Information Act. We have a number of other international instruments like those ones I mentioned earlier that were signed and ratified. And in ratifying it, we have international obligation to conform to the provisions of those charters and the international instruments. So those are all the ways human rights stands in Nigeria. It's much more than chapter 4 of the Constitution now. It has opened up or has been opened up by subsequent legislations, and therefore you have a wider range of rights protected. Now, what do we mean by accountability? Accountability simply refers to the effectiveness with which the government, that is citizens, can exercise influence over their governments, that is their government. It consists of various forms of holding elected and appointed officers responsible for their decisions and actions taken in the public space. Accountability is practiced in most nations by subjecting the holder of public authority to account to the people directly or through a variety of offices and institutions of the people.
whether it is to the National Assembly or whether it is to the Human Rights Commission, where a citizen can complain and they have obligation to come and explain their conduct, and a decision is taken on whether they were right or not, including the courts where the citizen can go to. These are all means and ways provided for checking the abuse of public power, which is what every public office holder is holding. He holds it in trust, is expected to exercise it in accordance with our law, and once he goes out of it, you and I can approach the courts to define whether he has acted within his power or he has violated our right. So, the purpose of accountability is ensuring that rulers rule according to the law and ethics of their society. One simple example of accountability method or accountability instrument is that subjecting the decisions of the President of Nigeria to a number of them to approval of the National Assembly. So yes, all executive power in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, according to Section 5 of the Constitution, is vested in the President. But if he must appoint somebody as minister to help in exercising that power, our power, that person must be approved by our representatives in the National Assembly. You want to appoint people who will exercise executive power whom we did not elect. Our representatives in the National Assembly must examine the person and be sure that he is worthy and that he can be trusted before that person can exercise that power. The same thing with appointment of ambassadors and a number of other things. You find them subjected to clearance of the National Assembly. So if you elect the proper people into the National Assembly and they do their work, they will ensure that only the right people are appointed to exercise public office. And they won't stop there. They will take their responsibility of auditing the government seriously. So they can also pass resolutions, they can invite them to answer questions, they can recommend that the President removes them. Currently, a few days ago, you had a little hullabaloo in the Senate, where Senator Ireti was asking the Senate to adopt some resolution over the demolition of houses in Abuja. Demolition of citizens' houses that they say we were not given appropriate opportunity to prove their ownership and the validity of their property. Their properties are being demolished and the lands are being revoked and they are awarded or they are assigned to other people. And Ireti brought that up, and the President said, well, it's not listed. I agree, it came up yesterday and we said it should be brought as a proper motion, but it's not listed in the order book for the day, so we cannot take it today. And the Senator has to, in protest, work out on the Senate President. Now, if you have proper people in that house, they will bring the Senate President to order. They will demand that the minister be brought to come and explain how you can demolish a house somebody has owned for 20 years and give it to another person. All those things are necessary. Power belongs to the public, and if it is not checked, it will be abused. It is natural. Nearly all of us, except for a chief, put in position of power. We are told that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Lord Byron, once you are put in power, in Nigeria they say it's like a spirit. People, your friends will be wondering, is this our friend that we have known for the last 10 years? You are thinking we change and all that, unless you are a powerful person. I come from a place where they are saying that when a powerful man handles a powerful instrument, like a powerful masquerade that is spirit laden and that is known to control people, that he will move as if he's not carrying anything. He will control that spirit and he will act like a man. That is what we call powerful man. But when you give power to a person who is not powerful, the power will overwhelm him. He will lose control of himself. He will become a masquerade. He won't know his brother and he won't know his friend. Everything will go wrong. So if you have the right caliber of people in your legislature, they will compel the government of the day to act according to law. The only reason why we have the madness that we have had in the country is that we are not putting round pegs in round holes. And so we are not getting the result expected of government. Yesterday I was watching that Ireti scene on one of our television stations. And the first thing that occurred to me is, look at our National Assembly. Have you seen the British Parliament? If you see the British Parliament, the hall, you will know that the people are there to work. Yes. It's not done like this our own with pump and purgatory and everything everywhere. They sit on what is like ancient chairs that are straight. They are there to work. They sit closer, not this our own spread out and all that. Government is business, it's serious business, and it's a business for only the serious-minded in society. It is the same thing in the United States of America. It is the same thing with every serious country. You don't go to the people's house to go and show wealth, put gold everywhere, put red carpet and put this and that on the wall and make it big like the United Nations General Assembly. It's not necessary. Go to China, go to Russia. They are there for work and they do work. So the moment we are able to get right the culture of electing the right people, I am sure that we will also see the result in the character of our government. Now, on the state of human rights today, I do not think I need to tell you much about what you are experiencing. Let's recognize the fact that something has gone wrong in the world. Things are no longer the same. I'm sure you know that in some parts of the world, war is going on. That war is being fought contrary to the international law, contrary to the rules of international law. The war between Russia and Ukraine is a war that is completely against the norms of international law. And it is going on. NATO and its members are sending arms to Ukraine to fight with this neighbor, Russia. Of course, Ukraine is the loser. Russia is stronger than Ukraine. So you can send weapons, but that will not overwhelm Russia. Russia has just brought out a few things. Before they brought out the last bomb they brought out, they warned the world that they were going to use this one, and they used it and we saw the effect. That is just an iceberg. The main things are still there. So all of that madness is playing out against the principles of international law and the norms of international behavior and what should happen. It means that there is some breakdown in the international polity on our ability to ensure that the right thing is done in line with the principles of international human rights law. There is something going completely wrong. There is a war going on, we have practically forgotten, between Israel and Gaza. It's called war. Some criminals attacked Israel, and Israel decided to bring down the entire Gaza. It was not an attack by Gaza. It was an attack by Hezbollah, a group which in Israeli law is a criminal group. What the nation does is to fish out the criminals and deal with them. But they decided to flatten the entire place. And the world, those on their side, are supporting them. Those against them are saying no. The United Nations has recently taken some decision declaring war crime and demanding that Netanyahu be arrested, issuing international warrant and things like that. These are all being done without any regard to the principles of international human rights law or international law. And so the world seems to have gone mad. And if that is happening, who shall we complain to? What is that Nigerian music? If you ask me, who I will ask? That is our situation now. So what is happening in our society as Nigeria is a part of what is madness that is happening in the international region. Now the character of our own is different. If you want to audit human rights in Nigeria, you can just think about 6 or 7 things. What is the state of life in Nigeria? Does life still enjoy Boko Haram by meaning? It is bandits. Government by itself now classify the criminals into some that are insurgents and those that are not insurgents, even though they are doing the same thing. They are committing genocide, they are kidnapping citizens, they are burning villages and killing citizens. But government says some cannot be dealt with criminally because they are not insurgents, they are bandits, etc., etc. They slaughter citizens, and instead of government reacting promptly, what you hear is let's learn to live with each other. Foreigners who take their cattle into your country and kill you are your brothers, and you must learn to live with them the way they were. That was under the last administration. Former President Buhari was known to issue those kind of responses to this attack. The scale of where life stands in what is remaining is for us to be moving in the streets and continue to walk. For now, they shoot, climb, they shoot, enter car, and get away. What is remaining is the one they will shoot and walk and be going, and nobody will talk to them. That's the point of which insecurity of life stands in Nigeria. Liberty, we are free as long as we are free, and we are able to come here and do what we are doing earlier. Because elsewhere, if this group of people are gathering here, government will detail some security arrangement. They are opening out for everybody in Nigeria. Yesterday, a young friend called me to say her husband was taking him, touching you, going away. We are taking you to Abuja this night. Their lawyers have gone to all the police stations in Port Harcourt in the night. They did not see the man anywhere. Whether they are real policemen or not, nobody knows. Nobody can do anything about it. If they are lucky, the man will come out alive. If they are lucky, it will be real policemen. If they are unlucky, it will be real policemen who are committing crime, and they may end up with paying ransom. If they are even more unlucky, it can be absolute non-policemen who are just criminals dressed in police uniform. And we hear these stories every so not guaranteed. Things are worse than they used to be. If society has broken our ability to look out for each other, well, the courts are doing a bit of a fair job, but for you to see that it has to be a case in which no big man has interest, because our court system has been badly damaged now, and it does appear that any case in which any man who has means has interest in, he can buy justice. If you ask the average Nigerian now, the thinking is that justice is bought with money. So you want to fight a case, you assess the person in one issue, you assess how rich he is, and whether you can deal with it. So they say no need, it's a waste of time. They will bribe the judge and get judgment. In high-profile cases, on daily basis, we see judgments that stand the law on their head, turn the law upside down. And what that does is destroy citizens' confidence in the court system. So we cannot say with certainty that fair trial is well protected in Nigeria today. It is only protected as long as there is no big man involved in the case. How about political participation? Let's sum it up in your ability. You are here because you want to improve your knowledge and understanding about making your society a better place. Let's say you want to stand for election to be a councillor. Can you do so today in Nigeria? You are a citizen, you have the full constitutional rights, but you cannot. Somebody will determine who goes as councillor in their constituency, no matter how popular you are in the constituency. Even if 95% of the constituency will vote for you, you will not get the ticket. Somebody will determine who will go, and it will be a loyal boy who will do what he is told, not somebody who will go to protect the interest of the society. So, from that point, as a citizen, you cannot exercise freely your right of political participation. How about determining the people who are elected? Are we doing that? Our work is to vote. Somebody writes results. Somebody announces the result. The reality of our political situation now, electoral situation, is that there are 3 phases, out of which 2 are important. The last 2 are the only ones important. Just write your name on the ballot. Go and sleep. If you have those who will write the result, INEC will write the result if you have paid them and announce it. What will you be told? go to court. When you go to the court, they are there. No matter how stinking, no matter how bad the reality of the election is, the court will give judgment. So citizens know that they don't elect their leaders. The next election, you will probably see apathy. That is worse than the last one. Because after the last one, with the biggest movement and the organization that was done, and the result came out the way it came out, people will lose confidence in the process completely. Did you hear that Ghana was holding an election last week? They held a presidential election. I did not hear. I only heard that Mahama has won election. You did not hear of preparation, writing of peace treaty, declaration of peace, and this and that. There was no war. There was no killing of anybody. Election, Ghana is just across the border. But in Nigeria, it is a declaration of war and people must die. Because citizens must not vote. Mahama was an opposition candidate and he won the election. But here, people must not vote. INEC must write results. And the court will decide whether INEC was right or wrong. So we can't say with certainty that the state of our political participation shows respect for our human rights, our civil political rights as citizens. You and I know the state of security. I just gave you an example yesterday. Even if somebody comes in here to pick me now, you will all be helpless. There's nothing you can do. You are not armed. Government increasingly gives more formations, power to possess arms, but citizens must not. And yet government cannot come to the security and aid of citizens when they are under attack. So perhaps we will grow one day to the point where we will do the American system. Where you come and I bring out my own small gun first and defend myself. And then before you come, you will think of how many people here are with their small guns and whether their own is big enough to defeat all. And that will determine whether you will attack or not. For work, I don't have to tell you, I don't know how many of you are employed. And those who are employed, I don't know how many of you are earning living wages. Some of us are spending more to go to work than we get at the end of the month. And people say it's the principle of chicken pepper soup. It's so sweet you can't pour it away. And yet it's not enough. It won't fill the stomach. But what shall we do? At all, our impact pass. So we just manage it. That is the state of work in Nigeria. Even business, the cost of running business now has become so serious. I was looking at some part of the road as I was coming. There used to be busy roads some time ago, some years ago. Those places used to be busy. Even ordinary artisans and ordinary people selling minor used to be on the road. Now it's not easy. How people are surviving, only God knows. And then the environment, you know that one is a foreign sector thing. They have no control of it. And we are just at the receiving end. That is the state in the survey of our human rights. The only thing that is to be added is that if what you have said here is bad, then it is even worse when you consider the fate of the woman in this environment. Because they suffer additional hardship and additional discrimination and deprivation that is beyond what the men suffer. The man can choose to work 18 hours a day. The time frame within which a woman can work because of insecurity is limited. And the distance she can go in seeking the well-being of her family is limited. So the worse the society becomes, is the worse the chances of the woman to eke out a living for herself by her own industry. So it becomes worse when you consider the state of the woman and, of course, children and other vulnerable people. So what do you think is the problem with us? What do you think is wrong? I just find 4 things. Some of them may be related, but I think they are the main problem. First one is what I call colonial heritage and mentality. There is no lying about the fact that part of the madness going on here is what we inherited. We have not been able to make ourselves into a nation the way Ghana did, the way India did, such that government is government and they know that their work is seeking the welfare of the people. We have not been able to do that. What kind of government system did we inherit? The colonial government or the totalitarian government? The king, then it was queen. The queen was right. Whatever the colonial government did was right. So this madness we are experiencing now did not actually originate from our people. Our people simply inherited it and carried it on. The colonial government left a system which ensures that it will be carried on so that they can continue to get the economic benefits of Nigeria being part of the Commonwealth, even if they are no longer here. A few days ago, I was talking to some people in the forum, and I said, if we were a reasonable country, we would declare one day to celebrate mosquito in this country. And they were laughing, but I told them it's true. The difference between you and South Africa, why they did not settle fully here, it's just mosquito. What they did in South Africa would have been done here. They would have settled here fully and taken over everything. But because they couldn't stand what they were calling the jungle fever, which is malaria, that was why they had to leave and organize their people to govern for their interest by themselves. Up to today, if you get to a hospital in the US, in the UK, and you have malaria, you will be quarantined. The way we quarantine COVID people here, that's how you will be quarantined. And people there who hear that there is a malaria patient in this hospital, we go and pull out their patients from that place. That's how deadly this plasmodium which you and I survives, 5 days, 7 days, malaria is gone. That is how deadly it is for them. That's the only reason why they drink still. So that colonial mentality where government could do anything, not anybody, take what belongs to anybody and nothing can be done about it, is what our people took over. So you hear some questions in Nigeria and some other African countries, which you don't hear in civilized world. Do you know the power of government? You will not hear anybody ask that question in America or in Britain. You want to try government? Do you know the power of government? We identify government here by power. Elsewhere, government is identified by responsibility. Only responsible people go, and government must show their people that they are acting in accordance with the law. Once you do anything and there is a little mistake, people raise their voices, you resign. Here we die there. Even if people protest and people are killed, we will remain there. So the cultures are different. What we got is not what they were doing in their own home. We continue what they were doing here. That was the starting point. So the first thing is that one. Then you have weak political institutions, and we know why the political institutions are weak. It's institutions that should act as watchdog and prevent human rights abuse and abuse of other rights are weak. But they are weak because of the lack of political will. They don't put the right people in those places. They use them as job for the boys. He was part of us in the election. He helped us. And let him be EFCC chairman. Let him be this and let him be that. Put him in the Human Rights Commission. So he goes there, that is his own settlement. He thinks of what comes into his pocket for the time that he is there. And not as a person serving the people. Who he speaks because he's somebody respected by the people. As somebody who can do that work. So our political institutions are weak because of the lack of political will, which is the third one. And the final word is weakened citizenry. There was a time in this country when you would do something and citizens would protest. You would do something, Nigerian students will say, no, this government policy will not happen. It's against the interest of our people. That was how Shenika and the others started the pirate. It wasn't a question of let's demonstrate strength. Let's show who is a bigger boy. It was patriotism. And they took on university administration and eventually took on government in their areas on issues that they considered anti-people. And the spirit of students' unionism grew. Students, ordinary students, who changed national policies at some point in the history of this country. But what has happened? All the systems have collapsed. The people have become weakened, not just by themselves, but deliberate policies have been designed to make them weaker. Where is the economic strength to go fighting? Where is the economic strength to go filing suits? How many of those who have the sentiments and patriotic feelings you have can sponsor a suit in court? and all that. So, by economic and political means, citizens have been weakened to such point that they are no longer as active as they used to be. How does this concern you as civil society organizations? First, civil society organizations means that you are not part of government. You are part of the civil society, you are part of the society. You are identified because you have a personality that is distinct from your individual self. You can shout from here till tomorrow, nobody will hear your voice. But if people hear on radio that Nigerian Social Action has said this or that, the voice will be heard. As an organization, as a civil society organization, you have a voice that is louder than the voice of the individual members in the group. And because of your character, because of your nature and character, the people trust you more than they trust their government. So you are in a better position to galvanize the people. You are in a better position to sensitize the people. Even now our citizens are weakened. To reawaken them will not be the work of orientation agency or government. You will do a better job. In all countries in the world, civil society organizations are closer to the people. They are better able to galvanize the people and get the people to do what they need to do. So it's your responsibility to sensitize our people and galvanize them into being able to hold your government and public servants to account. So civil societies must therefore increase their vigilance. A lot of things can happen and get away. Government agencies will get away scot-free. But if you raise it, it will become a national issue. It will be on the front burner of the news. A lot of high tension matters that have happened that have led to either removal, resignation, or change of high profile public servants came from civil society organizations and organizations that are not part of government. They come up through them. So you have the responsibility to increase your vigilance. We are not in normal times. So your level of independent monitoring and vigilance needs to be increased. You are more effective at getting people to know what is happening than government directly is. And again, yes, there are reporting places where they should report. They will tell their normal story and nothing will happen. How many times has a soldier been arrested for killing a Nigerian citizen? The PRO will come up and make statements. So they drag gun with him. The man behaved like an armed robber. He acted on his level. So the soldier had to shoot to defend himself. One person who is not armed will be shot by 10 soldiers, and they will say the soldier shot them in self-defense. It's difficult to find cases where public office holders violate rights of citizens and they react. The only reason they are reacting now is social media. Because it is captured live, it is put everywhere for the entire world to see. Those institutions become embarrassed, so they distance themselves from the embarrassment and say, he has been suspended, we are investigating, or he has been removed. But for that, none of those things will be happening. So you have work to do. While it is inevitable that government has a lot to do to change attitude, experience shows that government has no history of changing attitude from benevolence. They only respond to pressure. And because citizenry is seriously weakened now, the only way forward lies in the hand of organized citizens, civil societies, and community-based organizations, which is part of civil society, that have a louder voice. It even becomes better when they bring their voices together, act in synergy. No government officer can escape when civil societies join themselves and put an issue in front of them. So, what's the way to go? I think clearly what is missing in Nigeria is political will and the will to take even the rights of citizens seriously. So, we need to do something about that. And as I just said, that will not change because government does not decide to change. It is forced to change. So I think we have a number of responsibilities as a nation. First is to decolonize our mentality and idea of government. Let us not define government by power. Let's define government by responsibility, which is what is contained in the Constitution. The Constitution requires that government must act in the interest of the people in everything they do. Some of our laws even provide punishment for their acting outside of the rules, but they are acting according to the people who hand it over to them. And we have not been able to stop being a colonial government and become a people's government. That's why your soldiers and your policemen call you bloody civilians. They are unable to distinguish themselves from a people's army and a people's police, from the colonial police that was subjugating people in poor barbarians to force them to adopt their own ways. So we must decolonize our idea of government and public responsibility if we intend to make progress. Secondly, we need to enhance and depoliticize our institutions of accountability. If it continues to be job for the boys, none of those institutions will function. What is the problem we are having with the courts now? The courts are taking too much instruction from politicians. A lot of judgments are standing against normal reasoning, because even the citizen who is not a lawyer knows where it is supposed to stand on the scale of morality and on the scale of proper behavior. And they will be surprised that the courts will know the different thing. Did Akpabio contest for presidency in his party? No, in his party primary. Did Akpabio run for, was he an aspirant? Yes, he stepped down for delivery on the ground. The former Senate president was an aspirant. The law says you cannot run for two different things in one season. Somehow our court found a way. Oh, there is some problem with the way the matter was brought, and they struck out the matter and allowed them to do what the law says should not be done. A lot of the judgments, now we have Federal High Court Rivers State, we have Federal High Court Rivers State Abuja division. So all manner of things can be done, and the NJC is not asking Federal High Court Abuja, what are you doing in Rivers State? They are not. So as it stands now, nobody is sure that he will get justice from any case that comes up or that he's interested, unless he's dealing with his fellow citizen who has nothing. We have the court to look at what the law says and decide. For the others, it's as if it's no longer the law that is speaking, but what the parties can bring that determines judgment. Independence of the judiciary is one we must all fight hard to protect. And you know the beautiful thing about it? It reaches all of us. It's like death. You know, we have two deaths. None of us escapes those two deaths. We die when we die, isn't it? But after then, we are still alive. People still celebrate us. People still hold memorials. One day, the last man who knows you, who has you in his memory, or the last human being who has you in his memory will die. That day, the earth is reformatted. We are out of history. It's as if we never existed. We all suffer those second deaths in the politics, whether you are the president or any other thing, we all suffer it. Playing with the judiciary looks interesting when you are on the side controlling the judiciary. It is hell when another man is controlling the judiciary. When it was happening in Rivers State, I did say openly in one of the MBA programs that the danger with this thing is that what you create now will haunt you tomorrow. The courts are supposed to be independent. Our security, both as citizens and government, lies in the independence of the courts. But if you compare the courts to begin to look at places and begin to consider authority, your tenure will end. Your successor is the person the courts will obey. You will now be complaining. It's like this. All of us will suffer the effect of bad judicial system if we do not do something about it. So somehow as citizens and as civil society organizations, we must do all we can with the appropriate agencies like NPA and other stakeholders to see how we can get the judiciary to be properly independent again. That way, we can be sure that no matter what they do, as it used to be some years ago, you can go to court and court will say, no, you can't do this. And you remember Ojukwu versus military governor of Lagos State, where the military governor of Lagos State seized his father's property and all that. Ojukwu went to court. The matter went on, they went in, took control, chased Ojukwu and his people out of the place, and took control of the place. Ojukwu filed processes, they went to the higher court until the thing got to Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court asked a simple question. He said, this country is governed by the rule of law. You are in court with somebody on his property, and you move in without allowing the court to decide. You move in and take over the place and do what you like. We cannot hear you until you have purged yourself of that content. Can the Supreme Court do that today in the matter of the But the court did, even in the military government. So as it is, we need to find our way back to the past, where we were a normal country, so that at least our children can suffer less. So whether human rights will be sustained in Nigeria or not, rests squarely on the enhancement of open processes and public accountability. And this, I submit, depends largely upon the vigilance of the people. I will therefore conclude, as I did in another presentation I had somewhere, by saying, I quote, above all, we enjoin the people whose democracy the government operates to be awake and alive to their rights and responsibilities. Good government depends not on the benevolence of government functionaries, but on the vigilance of the people. We must courageously and jealously guard our democracy and our rights, that we may by so doing send a clear message to all, whether government or adventurers alike, that these great people under God's Son will no longer tolerate continuous violation of their rights and subversion of their destiny. End quote. Thank you very much for your attention.